Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and we are officially in election season. By the time you hear this, I will have voted, and I know many of you will have already cast your ballots in this important election. And joining us for today's conversation is Reverend Richie Butler, Senior Pastor at the historic St. Luke Community United Methodist Church in Dallas, Texas. We're going to talk about their civic engagement work and the importance of voting, but also about their work in bringing people together for conversations. And we'll talk about the importance of coming together as community after the election and the important role faith leaders play in that. And hopefully that speaks to where we are right now. My hope is that if you're listening to this podcast in the days before this consequential election, you're already doing all you can to make sure your friends, family, and congregations are voting. You're texting the young people in your life. You're reaching out to folks who might be less likely to vote. You're offering rides or even breakfast tacos to make voting as a group fun. But I also know that we're living in a heightened political environment. We might be worried about what happens after the election. And so it's important that we vote our values, but also that we are respecting our differences and rejecting violence. And it's important that faith leaders and people of faith promote those values over the course of the next few weeks. As always, Texas Impact has tools for you to engage folks on our website at texasimpact.org. I know many of you have been using the Texas Faith Votes resources, and I invite you to continue to use those in the next week and moving forward into future elections. I look forward to seeing your I voted stickers on social media and hearing about the creative ways that you're engaging voters. But for now, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Reverend Richie Butler. Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness. And y'all, we are officially in election season. By the time you hear this, I will have already voted, and I know many of you will have already cast your ballots in this important election. And joining us for today's conversation is Reverend Richie Butler, Senior Pastor of the historic St. Luke Community United Methodist Church in Dallas, Texas. We're going to talk about their civic engagement work and the importance of voting, but also talk about their work in bringing people together for conversations and talk about the importance of coming together as community after the election and the important role faith leaders will play in that. And hopefully that all speaks to where we are right now. My hope is that if you're listening to this podcast in the days before this consequential election, you're already doing all you can to make sure your friends, family, and congregations are voting. You're texting the young people in your life. You're reaching out to folks who might be less likely to vote. You're offering rides or even breakfast tacos to make voting as a group fun. But I know that we're also living in a heightened political environment. We might be worried about what happens after the election. And so it's important that we vote our values, but also that we're respecting our differences and rejecting violence. And it's important that faith leaders and people of faith promote those values over the course of the next few weeks. As always, Texas Impact has tools for you to engage folks on our website at texasimpact.org. I know many of you have been using the Texas Faith Votes resources, and I invite you to continue to use those in the next week and moving forward into future elections. I look forward to seeing your I voted stickers on social media and hearing about the creative ways you're engaging voters. But for now, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Reverend Richie Butler. Joining us for today's conversation is Reverend Richie Butler, Senior Pastor of the historic St. Luke Community United Methodist Church in Dallas, Texas. Pastor Butler, thank you so much for joining us today.
Scott, it's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Pastor, I hope you're okay with me asking this question. I'm asking everybody during the course of this 2-week period. Have you voted yet, and do you have your plan to vote?
I have not voted yet, but I am making sure that key segments of my household and other family members get out and vote. And I do have my plan. I've actually gone over the sample ballot online just to double check and make sure I know who's on the ballot, aside from the presidential candidates, which we all know that. So we will definitely get it done before Election Day, because I don't want to wait till Election Day.
Love that. I feel like, I'm a United Methodist, you're a United Methodist pastor. We don't really do the confession thing, but I feel like I have to offer a confession for all of our listeners. I've been saying on the podcast for the last couple weeks that I planned on going this last Tuesday, but our polling location didn't open till 8. My kids wanted to go. So we're actually going on Saturday. So to all of you who listen, who thought I was voting on Tuesday, I didn't, but I promise I'm going to do it on Saturday. But let's go ahead and jump in. Pastor, you are in a leading congregation with a long history of civic engagement work. Talk about that legacy and your congregation's commitment to civic engagement.
Well, I think embedded in our name is not just St. Luke United Methodist Church, but St. Luke Community. And we really take that to heart, and we recognize that you cannot have community without being civically engaged at all points and levels of our society, from local to county, federal, and state. And our pastor emeritus, Sam Wesley Holmes Jr., who was a former state legislative representative, also helped to set forth that mandate and that way of being for our congregation. So it's deep in our embedded in who we are. I mean, even within our vision statement, we're called to be Christ-centered, kingdom-minded, and justice-driven. And so everything we do at St. Luke, every Sunday, since we kicked off the official campaign season kicked off in September, before, as I stand up to deliver the sermon, I articulate something around voter education, making people aware, help them understand, what they need to do. For example, when we had over 1 million names, taken from the voter rolls, we literally, before I preached, I said, the word is important, but what's also important to know, if you've been, taken off the rolls, you need to know. So we literally had people go in the middle of service and literally confirm whether or not they are still eligible to vote. And we had people who were not. And so literally we had our PSAM, our political social action ministry, ready to register people on spot.
Love that. That was one of those Sundays you didn't mind everybody taking their phone out to check their voter registration, right?
That's right. They have them. They have their phones out anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Right. You mentioned being justice-minded, and this seems like a particular moment in history where the work of people of faith is especially important. I know your congregation's been doing that work and keeping that forefront of their mind. But are y'all feeling that weight? Are you and your congregation feeling kind of this moment in history as being unique?
Yes, I definitely feel it. I think we've been at a crossroads as a nation, probably the last 15 years, and I think there is probably almost a generation where we're working through who we are to become, and I think as a community of faith, I think we have to offer a perspective that is God-centered, that reflects God's attitude and disposition about humanity, and that is bathed in love, not division, and not separation from each other. And I think we are hearing it, especially the rhetoric from on a federal level, from on the presidential side, with all the sort of nasty negative campaigning. I think we definitely we need to continue to reinforce really what God values. I kicked off, or am kicking off, a series entitled "Character Matters," and to remind people, as you go to the polls, thinking about and unfortunately in our society today, man, we don't. Wealth matters. How many followers you have matter, but we don't put character on a pedestal anymore. And I think we have to remind people that it truly does matter. And ultimately, our leaders are a reflection of us. And also our leaders, we give our leaders, because we support them, we give them permission to act certain, so if we want people of character, then we need to, demand that, because people are going to act out. And I think as people of faith, we definitely have to, call leadership to accountability and challenge where there is wrong, where there is bad behavior. We need to call that out.
I agree. Faith leaders do need to call out bad behavior and do need to speak up about our values. That said, you also talked about the divisive nature of our current political discourse, and I feel like whenever that happens, folks retreat into their own camps. Try to only communicate or surround themselves in this bubble of folks who think just like them. But I know you're doing a lot of work to be intentional about talking with people with whom you disagree, with whom we disagree. Talk to us. And let me use an example because you mentioned Reverend Zan Holmes. My grandfather grew up was in the North Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, and he's passed now, but he used to speak so highly of Reverend Holmes and that work, even though my guess is they probably didn't agree politically or maybe even theologically on anything. And so there is that legacy of bringing people together who disagree. Talk about that work that you're doing and why it's important.
Well, first and foremost, I liken where we are when I think about United States of America. We've inherited this house, and the house may have foundational issues. It may have structural concerns, but we're in it, and we have to figure out how we fix, repair, and make it better, not just for the present, but for the future, the next generation who we pass this house down to. And with that in mind, I think it is so critical for us to recognize that we definitely have differences. But what I found is what truly unites us is far greater than what divides us. If we sort of did a side-by-side analysis, there may be one or two, three, or few things, but there are a boatload of other matters that truly recognize our humanity, and I think that's part of what we've been working on, is trying to help people recognize that we're all human, and to move from this otherization of people. If you're not like me, if you think differently than me, then you're other, and that is that's almost a form of evil to some extent, where we literally demonize people, and we've allowed our politicians to play that game, and then we bought into it. And so we're definitely working to shift that narrative, and how we're doing it is by leveraging the things that naturally bring us together. Politics does not bring us together. And also, as a pastor, religion, for the most part, does not bring us together. It serves as it. But think about some of the things that bring us together. Sports brings us together.
Right.
You can get people from all walks of life, different backgrounds, in an arena, and cheering for the same team. If that team does something exciting, they don't know each other, but they'll start high-fiving and chest bumping and getting all excited about what's going on. Sports has that power. Think about when Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. New Orleans returned. What signaled New Orleans' return was not when the schools opened. It wasn't when the church opened. It was when the New Orleans Saints returned to the Superdome. It signaled we're back.
Right.
Sports, music brings us together. Food brings us together. And so what we've done is try to leverage those things, because if we approach it from what is our point of division, we will never get to a place of just engaging in authentic conversation and humanizing each other, and recognizing that, hey, we know we have this thing, but we have a whole lot of other things that really bring us together. Just like a couple. I mean, I've been happily married for 30 years, and I don't agree with everything. Now, my wife is the boss. I will say that and be very clear. And I think
right.
Part of the recording, she's the boss, but we don't agree on everything. But we have found a way to come together and to make it last for 30 years happily.
Pastor, you brought up sports. I won't ask you about the Dallas Cowboys right now. We'll leave that conversation for another day. But talk to us about some of the ways that you and your congregation are doing that work. I know B and I, our executive director, we're talking about Together We Dine and Project Unity, two projects that I know you're passionate about. Those seem like good models for other congregations and communities. Talk to us about those programs.
Yeah. I started Project Unity about 10 years ago in response to what was going on to police community relations. And, Project Unity is simply a force multiplier to bring about solutions to some of our most daunting, challenging problems like race relations, police community relations, even now as we are now leaning into political relations. And we leverage and what we do everything under our Together We programs, like Together We Dine. So Together We Dine is a program of Project Unity, and so we're bringing people together to have safe, courageous conversations about topics that are challenging, topics that take people from 1 to 100 in a nanosecond. I mean, you want to take someone off the deep end. You say certain words, and we try to do it in a constructive, tamed environment that again humanizes the other, but most importantly forces us to simply listen to each other. We don't do a good job of listening to people. When we have an opinion on something, we really don't want to hear the other side. We don't want to hear a different opinion. And so, like through our Together We Dine, we leverage questions that are introspective, self-reflective, that allows people to speak from their journey, their experience. And everyone else who's at the table, when that person is speaking, their job is simply to listen and to hear the humanity and the connectivity and the things that really unite us. And when it's not that person's turn, it's my turn to respond to my question. Their job is to listen. And man, if we exercise the art of listening more, I think we would be better off. And furthermore, I don't know if you've thought about this, but the very words, the very letters that create the word listen also form the word silent. And sometimes we have to silence our opinion, silence our attitude so that we can truly hear. And as people of faith, so that we can hear God. Because sometimes we think because, we have this saying, God was on my side. Now, I just want to be on God's side. And sometimes we think God's on our side and we're far off. I'm just focused on being on the side of where God is.
Love that. What's the impact been?
Wow. So with our with Project Unity, we're definitely having amazing impact in our community across the board. I'll just say one thing as it relates to police community relations. There's now a law here in Texas that requires our students to be trained on how to interact with law enforcement, because we've had all these officer involved encounters. How do we reduce those education? And so and that law came as a result of a state senator witnessing our program and went back to the legislature, and now we've enacted that, and we're trying to reach thousands of students to make sure they understand what that looks like. And as it relates to our Together We Dine, I mean, we're literally partnering with Common Ground, a peacekeeping organization, global peacekeeping organization. And so we've kicked off a series of Together We Dines around the state of Texas to bring the diverse political influences and thoughts together to recognize that, hey, we cannot keep beating each other down and expect to get the kind of results that our children, we should be garnering for our children. And so we've launched in that. Like this year, we will probably host about 100 Dine events, not just in North Texas, not just in the state. We just came from Washington, D.C. at George Washington University hosting Together We Dine. We'll be in Houston. We were in Midland, Texas, doing a Dine, and in San Antonio the day after that. And we're doing it with corporations like Texas Instruments, to a Toyota of the world, who are engaging with us, to athletic departments at colleges and universities who want to engage their diverse population So it is working, and probably the best example of that is that we're not marketing. People are calling us and saying, "Hey, can you do?" Or someone will attend a dine and like, "I need to take this back to my organization, my church." Actually, you'll celebrate this. A few years ago at the North Texas Annual Conference, the luncheon was a Together We Dine. So we had about almost 500 United Methodists within the North Texas Conference engaged in a conversation around race.
Love that. I know you just said you're not marketing it, but I know there are going to be a bunch of people who are listening who are interested. Where can they learn more or find more information?
They can go to projectunity.net. That is projectunity.net for more information about the Dine program.
Love that, and we'll make sure we post that link in the show notes. Pastor, the reason we're having this conversation today is I know you've also been involved in conversations about how we pull this potential mess back together after Election Day, and there's certainly going to be a big role for faith leaders and faith communities because it has been so divisive, and we want to make sure that faith leaders and faith communities are on the forefront of making sure that we come together as community on November 6th, the day after the election. So talk to us about those conversations you've been involved with and what role you hope faith leaders will consider as we move into the aftermath of the election coming up soon.
Well, I think, for example, at our church, we are, taking strategic steps to, like on Wednesday, the day after, we're going to probably have some type of prayer event to, no matter the outcome or the fact that it probably may not be settled on November 6th, but to remind us that God is still in charge. And that we want to call on our better angels in this moment, and so that we're also thinking about. I've been praying about this. I'd like to host a Heal the Nation tour around our Together We Dine and engage people from the different sides to come together, recognizing that honestly we cannot move forward operating in the state we've been operating in. It's not. I mean, it's like it's toxic, and so we have to, and I think faith leaders play a major role because they and that means those faith leaders that I have a completely different theological bent from. So when I say heal the nation, I'm not talking about going to people who have similar ideology. I'm talking about going to people who have a different ideology, and let us, as the word of God says, let us reason together, says the Lord of hosts, and really seek, what I believe is two critical elements for our democracy: what is common ground and what is common sense. That's why Jesus says, I have not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and of sound mind, common sense. And, sometimes we can get so charged from our ideological bents that we lose, sight of what is common sense. I hate to get preachy, but think about this. When Jesus, when the Pharisees challenged Jesus because he decided to heal someone on the Sabbath, that the doctrine said that wasn't supposed to happen, but common sense said this person needs healing. I don't care if it's a Sunday or a Sabbath day, it's going to happen. And so I think sometimes we have to approach some matters from a place of common ground and common sense. And I believe that is, our hope, our aspiration, that faith leaders will lean into and help lead this nation, because our political leaders are not going to lead us. I think we have to lead them to a promised land.
Amen. Pastor, I'll let you preach anytime. You can come on and let you go. I usually close out with giving our guests a chance to offer some shameless plugs or closing thoughts. I know we've got the website out there. We'll have in the show notes. Any other challenges you'd leave with our listeners today?
At the end of our dine, we ask people to take the Unity Challenge. There are 3 things we ask people to do. We ask them to listen, to take the time and listen to someone else's story, especially someone that you may have a preconceived notion about. As we're talking about, the political divide, someone is on the opposite, spectrum of the political aisle, engage them in a listening exercise about their story, their journey, and yours. I promise you, the two of you will leave that experience different. The second thing we ask people to do is not just listen, but learn. And that is to take your shoes off and walk in someone else's shoes. Far too often, we are so comfortable in our Air Jordans or our, whatever shoes we wear that we are not willing to take our shoes off and to really walk in someone else's shoes. And that will give us a place of understanding. And I believe it also leads us to a place of empathy for the other. And the third thing we ask people to do is not just listen, learn, but to engage in conversation and activity that improves our community. And sometimes some of the stuff we're engaged in is not improving and is not making things better. And we're more of the problem than the solution. So that would be my call to action or leave behind for people.
Love that. Pastor Richie Butler, thank you so much for the time today. Thanks for the work you're doing. You're an incredible inspiration to all of us. And we've got some real work to do over the coming weeks to lead, to help folks come together. And I really appreciate you sharing that message today.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much for opportunity.
I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Reverend Butler, and I hope you'll find some opportunities to be in conversation with your community and maybe have some authentic conversations with folks with whom you disagree. I also hope you'll consider whether Together We Dine could be a good idea for your community. We'll provide the link in the show notes. Y'all, Texans of Faith are going to play an outsized role in the weeks leading up to and especially following this election. And I know we're up for it. I hope we'll consider the words of Reverend Butler today and think about what we can do over the course of the next few weeks. But as we prepare to sign off today, I know I've been saying it for weeks, but make sure you have a plan to vote if you haven't done so already, and spend some time between now and Election Day reaching out to your friends, family, and community members that might be less inclined to vote, and make sure they have a plan. Y'all, we're going to spend the next year talking about the policy implications of what happens in the next 2 weeks, so no regrets. Let's put the work in now. As a reminder, Texas Impact has tools for you to encourage civic engagement, check your ballots, and make a plan to vote, and so much more. All of that's on our website, in addition to opportunities to join teams where you can connect with other Texans from throughout the state who care about issues you care about. Check out the website for all of that and so much more at texasimpact.org. While you're there, I hope you'll take a moment to sign up to be a member of Texas Impact. Your membership supports this podcast and all of the work to engage Texans of faith to advocate for a more just and equitable Texas. If you have questions about any of it, please reach out. You can reach me at scott@texasimpact.org. And with that, I think it's time to close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnet, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.